Some of you know who I am and some don't. I'm Bruce McFarlane. I am teaching a course on miscarriages of justice here at Robson Hall, and the whole area of wrongful convictions is one that I am very, very concerned about. And we've had, as you know, a fair bit of experience in that field in the province of Manitoba. We have an incredible experience at hand today. William Mullins-Johnson, he prefers to be called Bill, has agreed to come to Manitoba, exclusively to Robson Hall, to talk to you. Bill was just an average guy doing average things until the 27th of June of 1993, when his life came crashing down on him and forever changed the course of his life. It's an incredible experience. It's a moving experience. And what you're about to hear will be full of raw emotion, detailed as to what happened to him. I think there's no point in listening to me. I know you want to listen to Bill. Am I still there? Okay. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Bill Mullins-Johnson. Bill.
Well, can everybody hear me all right? I hope so. I'm not really comfortable speaking in front of crowds that much, although this is becoming more and more of my life now, actually speaking here and there and everywhere and places in between. But I am privileged and I'm honored to be asked to come here to speak with you on miscarriages of justice. Bruce was right that yes, there will be some emotion involved here. Every time I do this, it's like pulling the scab to let the air at the wound so we could heal better. So I jump at these chances every time so I could purge myself of these resentments that I hold, this rage that's in me because of this, because of what happened that led me into prison. And so I guess I'll start from my arrest, actually. It was, for me, it was an ordinary day for me, actually. At that time in my life, I was doing a futures program in Ontario at the time. It's for youth to get back to school or work or both. And I was working half-day school and going to school half-day at the time. I was living with my brother Paulie, his common-law wife Kim at the time, and their kids, Jean, Valen, and John. And it wasn't odd for me to babysit them. Whether I was living with them or not living with them, I enjoyed the company of them little kids, and I used the opportunity to get my homework done, simply put. That night she died, I was babysitting as normal, and Kim found Valen on her bed, dead, at about 7 a.m. After Polly and I went back to her room, Polly tried to administer CPR but couldn't. She was dead. And less than 12 hours later, after the police cleared the house in the afternoon and did whatever they did that afternoon, they come back less than 12 hours later and arrested me for first-degree murder and aggravated sexual assault. I would spend about next year and a half or so in the Sioux jail, waiting for trial. And when the trial finally came, it was a weird thing that happened during the trial. I was had death threats on me up till the beginning of my trial, from guard, convict, police, community, whatever. I was targeted for death. And as the trial continued, people saw more and more that the case against me was non-existent. But yet, in the end, I was convicted. So I spent the next 11 years in the federal system, 10 of which was at Workworth Institution outside of Peterborough, Ontario. And that's where I would spend the next 10 years. I got to Workworth in July of 95, and I got out in September of 2005. When I got out in 2005, September 21st, it was 11 years to the day I was convicted, oddly enough. And at that point in my life, I spent 1/3 of my life in prison for something that didn't even happen, which is really now the source of my anger and my frustration, humiliation. Excuse me, I'm just kind of... A lot of things happened over those years. But one thing that didn't happen was they did not turn me into a child killer in prison, because that's what they tried to do. They try, the only rehabilitation that goes on in prison is to try and condition the convict into thinking that the only place that they could survive in this world is prison. That's why the revolving door is in existence. So after my conviction, I contacted ADWIC immediately, and they told me that they could not do anything until I exhausted the appeals. So I went through the appeal process, and the first appeal was denied in 96 with a dissenting judgment, which automatically meant that the Supreme Court had to hear my case in front of them, which they heard in 98. And they denied me as well with one sentence, which pretty much reiterated the Ontario court. They didn't come up with any fresh judgment of their own or fresh opinion of their own. They just went along with the crowd, just like everybody else did. That got me convicted to begin with. I'm a bit lost of words right now because I just got done speaking across the hall over there, but feel free to ask questions as I'm speaking here, because I'm here to help you understand the consequences of failing in the system. Because the failings are not only in the system itself, it's those that run it. And I mean crowns, and I mean defense attorneys. In my case, there was no crime committed by anybody. That's how easily it is to convict somebody. On no evidence. Invented evidence. Conclusions that were reached by phone call conversations alone. The court of public opinion, putting it in the press, making it high profile. Garnering support through scaring and angering the public is how I got convicted. I have no doubt in my mind about that. I spent many years in there going through a mental breakdown and an emotional breakdown. There was about a 3-4 year period where months on end, and if I'm lying, I'm dying. There were months on end when I would just lay in my bed in my cell shake and cry. Shake and cry. Day in, day out, from sunup until whenever I went to sleep. And looking back on those years, I don't know how I got through it. To tell you the truth, I figured somebody was going to cut my head off eventually, or I was going to succumb to the intensity of it and kill myself. But I started working with the elder in Warkworth, with my elder, Vern Harper. And he taught me a lot about discipline and taught me a lot about truth of the self more than anything else, more than the truth around you. It's because it was the truth that was inside me that motivated defiance in me. I defied the system. I defied what my case file said about me. And I would not hide. I stood out there. And I accepted history's judgment at that time. But knowing that I could look in the mirror and look at myself and say, you know what? You did nothing to get you here. And it's going to be them that's going to lie to continue to keep you here. So there's no sense in changing the person that you are. So I didn't. And because of that, I got ridiculed for it when I was in. I got threatened by guards. I got thrown in a hole on different occasions for frivolous things. I got thrown in a hole and threatened to get shipped out to Kingston Penitentiary for telling a staff member to shut up. And that was after he threatened my life. And this was in 2004. He did this. And over the 10 years of the work with, I experienced that periodically. Guards saying that they should kill me, that I should die. You're a piece of shit, you're a scumbag, you're this and that. And I wouldn't let them do that to me. I stood nose to nose with guards over the years. And I told them, you know what, pal? This ain't my home. I don't belong here. This is your home. And if I threaten your home that much, then feel free. Feel free to kill me. Go ahead. Because I don't belong here anyway. You do. I don't feel no sorrow for guards that used to say to me, well, you know what? We're doing a life sentence too. You know? I said, well, you know what? You're here by choice, and that's sick. I'm not. But I maintained when I was in there, through exercise, through working with the elders. I became a long-distance runner when I was in. On average, I was running 20 miles a week, 5-mile runs, 4 times a week. No problem. I was working out with weights 6 times a week. That's how much energy, how much anger I had in me. But I refused to become that place, that environment, that type of person that belonged there. There were convicts that used to go hit the heavy bag, hit the speed bag when they got frustrated, angered. I never would. Because that too is discipline. When you go hit out of anger, that's disciplining you to only strike out in violence when you get angry, instead of using reason and vocabulary and calmness. I went the opposite route. I became the antithesis of what prison is. Prison is a very violent place. And the fact that I was there for something that didn't even happen is even more sickening than I could even say. Because a lot of these words that I'm speaking with, pale in comparison to the realities that I went through when I was in there. When I was first arrested, I was held in the hole for almost a year. And I remember one week, just after I was arrested, every prison does this. They bring in public people, like people from the public, laymen, to tour the prison to see what the conditions are in there. Right nor wrongly, that's what they do. And this one day, they brought a tour through, and they brought him into the hole. And I was laying on that cement bed, and I had my face to the wall, and I heard them walking down to my cell. I was down at the very end, and that guard knocked on my cell. I don't even think he knew I was awake, and I heard him say this. And again, if I'm lying, I'm dying. He knocked on my door and said, here is our residence cycle. I can never prove if any of those people end up on my jury or whatever the case may be. But doing such things pollutes jury pools. It corrupts what we like to believe the justice system is. But as far as my family goes, their life was changed as much as mine was. I think of my brother Paul. He's still going through his hell. I don't know if any of you listened to the Fifth Estate, watched the Fifth Estate on this. But my mom posed an interesting question on there. How many times does someone's life has to change before we get things right in this country? My life, since I got arrested on this, has changed about 15 times in various ways, in very deep ways. The strain with my family is still there, but it's not as much. With my immediate family, it's mending in leaps and bounds. I'm close with my brother Paul again. I'm close with my other brothers and my nephew. And I'm still holding out hope that I will reunite with my niece. But just the impact on this that it had on my family, and not just my immediate family. When you come from an Aboriginal community, family runs deeper than just immediate family. Second cousins I grew up with were like brothers and sisters to me. Friends that I grew up with were like brothers to me. Everybody knows each other. Everybody loves each other. And this shattered my community, is what it did. The ripples that were sent through Botswana First Nation and Garden River First Nation, I don't ever think could be measured. You know, right or wrongly, Aboriginal people really don't think much of the Canadian justice system. And with my community, with what happened to me and how things turned out the way things are now, only solidifies that mistrust, that distrust within the Canadian construct, man. This is more than just an isolated case, as you may know, which what's come out at the Gouge Inquiry and the original investigations on Charles Smith. But even more basic than that, when you think of in terms on lines of culture and strata, when an issue crosses both those lines in such devastating ways, then something must be done, and it must be done now. Because if it doesn't, there's going to be someone here like me standing here asking the future crowns and future defense lawyers get off your asses and do something right. Because I do resent, I resent a lot of things, which I'm trying to purge myself from. I resent that my life has gone in such a way that now I got to be standing here, almost yelling, almost flipping tables, asking for the next generation to pull up. That's a jail term. Pull up, you know. Do your jobs right, and these things won't happen. Scrutinize everything that comes in front of your desk. Verify where the evidence comes from. And don't be so willing to judge somebody guilty just because of the nature of the charge. Because I was convicted of murder in first degree. And they said in the process of a sexual assault. But I tell you this, I was never convicted of sexual assault. So to tag that on me is wrong. And it's illegal. And it's slander. It is attack on a person's identity to put them through the things that I was forced to go through, to do the things that I had to survive. And what I mean by that is I had to conform to that prison environment in some way. I had to become hard. I had to become ready to take a life to defend my life. And nobody's guilty, justly or not, justly convicted or not, nobody should have to live under such climate, day in, day out. Because there is no rehabilitation in there the way we understand it. What rehabilitation is or want rehabilitation to be. But yet there's even more issues that go along with just facing prison and facing the scowl of the public. Through my experience and the others that I've come to know, it'd be easy to say that being wrongly convicted changes life. That's easy to say that. However, when these people come out of prison, there is no resources for us in terms of job training or opportunity to advance our personal lives, because we're so shocked. I was anyway. I went through such culture shock when I got out that there was no way I'd be able to find work without the intervention of family or friends. Because what employer is going to look at my resume and see a 12-year hole in my life and say, where were you those 12 years? Well, I was in prison for something I didn't do. Well, we don't want to hire you. Then there's the psychological impact of that. Because I have no doubt whether I could be diagnosed with anything or not, but I know for a fact that I could be diagnosed with something. Post-traumatic stress, whatever it is. I'm suffering it, and I suffer it daily. Because this has impacted not only past relationships that I'm trying to repair, but they're impacting what will be future relationships. And that's not right either. Because I can't function as well as others could because of what happened to me. People aren't willing to get involved with me when I tell them of my past, when I tell them what I went through, and when they see this anger that is in me and these problems that I'm forced to deal with in counseling. And largely, we have nowhere to go, nowhere to turn for assistance. There's organizations like John Howard that is exclusively for the convicted person coming out of prison. There's nothing for us. And that puts them in a deeper shell to make poor choices, to make bad decisions, because largely I have the same issues and same problems as a justly convicted person, because I went through the same machinery they went through, and the effect is the same. Trust. Just saying that I distrust pales to the intensity of my life. I don't know if people are want to be around me for the right reasons or not anymore. And that's not right either. But what I resent most is when I meet somebody that I'm interested in, that I have to tell them. I have to tell them about this right off the get-go. Because if I don't, any situation that arises after that, well, it'll destroy relationships. So I throw it out there at them, and I tell them, this is what I've been through. This is not who I am, but this is what I went through, and this is how it impacted my life. And largely, people walk away from me because of it. Really. Because most people don't have capacity to deal with somebody like this. I don't have the capacity to deal with myself like this. But I got to live with it. And I got to try and make some sense of this. And right now, I'm not making any sense of it at all. You know? No amount of apology, not even no amount of compensation can, there's no amount of anything that's going to erase the fact that I was in jail for something that didn't even happen. And as a crown, whether he believed I was guilty or not, he did not uphold my rights as a human being in front of that court. He did not give me the benefit of the doubt of anything. I was put in a position where I had to prove my innocence rather than the Crown proving my guilt. Because in the court of public opinion, his job was half done. And that's not right either. Earlier in my other talk, a question was posed to me if I felt that my defense attorney did the best that they could do. And tell you the truth, in rethinking that question, I really don't have an answer to that anymore, because I could sit here and I could yell about fair play, and I could scream about a proper defense, but the bottom line is, and always will be, you'll get the best defense money can buy, and when most people are forced to rely on legal aid, they will not get a proper defense. Even though they are sworn to defend the person and to defend the rights of that person. But my rights weren't respected. My rights were stripped away from me. My right to be presumed innocent until proved guilty was stripped away from me. My right to protection of an unlawful seizure was stripped from me. My human rights were stripped from me. And the magnitude of that may not be much when you think of an individual case. But more and more, year after year, we're hearing about these cases. I think about James Driscoll. I think about Kyle Unger. I think about David Milgaard. I think about Donald Marshall Jr. I think about those other cases from the I don't know if you want to call it a Smith scandal or whatever you want to call it, but from the action of Charles Smith, all those people that were forced to go through the things that I went through, man, there's no hole in the Canadian justice system. It's a crater. It's a crater that is not being filled with anything but more dynamite to make the crater bigger. And the biggest example is last fall, when the Supreme Court ruled that no Crown could be held liable or accountable for things that do, including prosecutorial misconduct. And that is sick. That is sad, and it speaks a lot to the state of the justice system in this country. There is no justice in this country because it's not a justice system, it's a conviction system. Because everything is set up for a conviction. Every approach that lawyers take that I've seen is for conviction. That's why there's high rates of plea bargains. And more you see forced confessions by the police. Forced confessions, threats of this or that. And yes, I was threatened when I was interrogated, when I was arrested. I was threatened. In fact, that cop that arrested me told me that he was going to make sure that I went down for this, regardless. So I invited him to pull his gun and put a bullet in the back of my head. And when he asked me why, I said, well, you know what? Because that's easier than what you're about to put me through. But like all cowards, they hide behind the positions. Because anyone associated with wrongful conviction that refuse to admit, you know what, I screwed up here a little bit, you're a coward. You are a coward to hide behind your position. And matter of fact, when I got cleared in October of 2007, I held a press conference up in Sault Ste. Marie because of a comment made by the Crown that prosecuted me. In 2005, a week before I got out on bail, he brought my brother Paul, my brother Leslie, and my uncle Gord, and whoever else into his office. And he told them, don't you worry, I will make sure that he remains in prison. And that too is illegal, as far as I could see. That's why I didn't move home right away, because I figured the Crown would do something, send somebody out to start trouble for me. And sure enough, man, his sentiments were clear. He's retired since. But I remember in one newspaper, well, not a newspaper, in a TV interview, he wasn't on camera, but he refused to apologize to me. Refused. The last, from 2005 until he retired last year, he gave up his position as a public servant because he had a personal agenda with me. Because I was a black eye to his career. Not to his life, to his career. He has since came out in an interview last year in the Sioux Star saying that, yeah, everybody got it wrong about Mullins-Johnson. But yet he still wouldn't apologize. I saw him in the Sioux last year, and he tried to sound all concerned. Oh, hey, Bill, how's it going? How's things? You doing okay? The right decision. I made the right decision. I didn't say a word. I just walked past him. I just walked past him because he's a small man. Small-minded, narrow-minded man. And I use the word man loosely here because he is a coward. I don't know what else to say, really. this changed my life, and that'd be easy to say. But the depth of the changing can't be said in the time allotted here, because I'm still suffering from that humiliation. I'm still, in some ways, living in the past still a little bit, trying to deal with the death of my niece. I'm still trying to deal with the effects that the prison had on me. Because yes, Warkworth is a PC joint, which is a different than any other kind of joint, but prison is prison, and my life was threatened every single day in there. So right now I'd just like to open the floor up to any questions here. Anybody has anything to ask me, comments? Because right now I'm just kind of getting too worked up for my own good. Yes?
First, I just want to say thanks for coming to something so hard and explaining that. But you mentioned earlier about how there's no chance of rehab in prison. Do you think there's any changes they can make that could give people a chance, like to have a life where it's lost all?
That's complex. That's complex because, yes, there is very little rehabilitation to non-existent rehabilitation in terms of the prison providing adequate programs and adequate opportunities. However, the onus still must be put on the convict, on the inmate himself, to make those better choices for himself or herself. When I was in, yes, I could read and I could comprehend things and I could write and everything like that. But when I was in, I started reading more and started questioning what was around me. And I started participating in that infrastructure. I was Brotherhood chairman in the prison I was in 4 times. So I had to read policy and I had to read law, and that's how I rehabilitated myself. You know, I also rehabilitated myself by understanding the environment I was in, and worked feverishly not to become that. Yes, I had to live in it, but I didn't have to become it, where most convicts become it. Because we're so conditioned to externalize everything. Out here, from the time we're born, we're taught to externalize, whether it's things we wear, things we say, how we express ourselves. But in prison isn't about externalization, it's about internalizing. Keeping things inside. That's why they're built the way they are. They're built to keep the convict in. They're built to keep the realities of what goes on in there away from the eyes of the public. So you put any person who's been conditioned to externalize into a place of internalization, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be conflict. I went the opposite route. I internalized after a while. I went inside myself and struggled around with those existential questions of who am I? Why am I here? Do I belong here? Where do I belong? And every conclusion was, I don't belong in prison. Never have and never will. And that's what kind of helped me shield myself from the effects of prison, to be totally... I tried to guard from becoming what they wanted me to be, and that was a cowardly child killer. And that's the best way I could answer that for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because as like rehabilitation of the self, much of the onus is on the individual. When you're battling anything, when you're dealing with anything, when you're debating anything, whether it's in a court or publicly like this, you got to look into yourself on what you believe in, and if you believe that going along with the status quo is the okay thing to do, then feel free, go ahead, but understand the consequences of your actions, because we're not merely case files. I've been told that lawyers stand for something. Yeah, they do. From what I've seen, though, they don't stand for very much. Because they go along with the status quo, because they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them. Me, that system doesn't feed me. It never has, never will. So I got nothing to lose fighting against that. And if you think in such binary terms of what I'm going to lose if I challenge this, then you shouldn't be in the position or that profession. Because you're just lying to yourself. You're not lying to me, or not lying to the courts. You're lying to yourself, and you have to go to that mirror and say, did I do right by this person? Did I do enough? And if the answer is no, then you failed in your job. Simply put. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know enough about law schools to really comment on that. The only thing I could say is to make sure you add in what I just talked about, the onus of the self. Understand? No, there's no system in this world that is perfect. I understand that. Because if it was, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have gone through what I went through. But yet when you're allowing external forces to influence your professional behavior, that's not right either. Because this is where it counts. This is where it counts. Understanding who you are as a person first is where it counts. The profession is just that, a profession. You know, I've been told by some lawyers, in my time in reading and stuff, learning about vocabulary and language, like from my own limited exposure to it, I've always heard about the word as. Two simple letters put together, as. As a human being, I am disgusted by wrongful convictions. But as a lawyer, I have to defend the system. As a human being, I am all for fighting the good fight. But as a judge, I could only rule on law. Understand what I'm getting at? As soon as there's a conflict in your identity and what you're conveying out to the public, as soon as there's a conflict, you better reevaluate of what you believe in. Because if you don't, there's going to be a lineup out that door of wrongly convicted people telling you similar things to what I'm telling you today. Because it is important to get criminals off the street, yes. There is a need for police in today's society, yes. And there is a need for defense lawyers and Crown attorneys. Yes. But there's also the need for common decency. Common decency to the human spirit that we claim we defend. Common decency of our fellow man, to give him the benefit of the doubt that is rooted in law. Isn't it what Section 7 of the Constitution? Presumed innocent? I was not presumed innocent, and neither is any other defendant in this country. We are never presumed innocent. We're always presumed guilty, because that's the way the system is set up. And because of that, the system must change. And it changes right here. Right here. The next generation coming up that are swearing to defend the rights of people. This is where it begins. So I take these opportunities to come here, and I run with them the best I can, because everything I just told you here is just opinion. But yet, whose opinion is more important? Charles Smith is defended for his opinions, and look what he's done with his opinions. I could be held accountable for some of the things I've said. Where's the fair play? There is no fair play. Because Charles Smith did commit criminal acts. Whether any Crown has the guts enough to stand up and prosecute this man. But that won't happen. But that won't happen. Because this man is an upper strata than I am. And that's not fair either. I would like to see the same protection and benefit of the law as somebody in an upper class as me. But that's not going to happen either. Because when it comes down to it, you get the best defense money could buy. And when you're on the lower rungs of that strata, you won't get a proper defense because you have no money to get to those resources to prove your innocence or even get a proper defense. It's the only way I can explain that. Yep.
I just want to talk about the Code of Public Opinion law.
Mm-hmm.
Those newspapers like to use the word allegedly.
Mm-hmm.
Times.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had any opinions on what you think can be changed, because it always does come out very one-sided about it being needs to change in the media or even laws that control the media.
Well, again, it comes down to the individual reporter doing these stories. I remember, like, I could probably research feverishly, but I'm sure that it's hidden in the archives of the Sioux Star. But I remember one of the headlines in the Sioux Star just after I was arrested: child killer caught. Where is the liability to the Sioux Star for poisoning a jury pool that way? I'm just a lonely Indian, an Aboriginal person with a prior conviction that was charged with the worst crime in today's society. That's what was out there. One way I could explain that. Yes, I do. I have no doubt in my mind about that. You just have to look at the reports that have come out in the last, I'd say, 25 years. Year after year after year, the trends show that Aboriginal people are sentenced to harsher periods of time, harsher crimes than our non-Aboriginal counterparts. We're kept in prison for longer periods of time. We're kept at higher security levels than anybody else, away from adequate programming to complete our correctional plans. I'm not saying it's solely to get the Indian. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that's how it's utilized, because the trends show it. And matter of fact, when I was in, I started a human rights complaint back in 2004, which is going to tribunal next month. The treatment of Aboriginals in prison. Me against the prison system. And I started that back before I had any inkling of Charles Smith. Because what's going on in the system, and when I say system, I mean the policing system, the court system, and the prison system. Aboriginal people are at a disadvantage because of who we are and where we come from and how we're viewed. Consider this, I did ask for a change of venue in my trial. My lawyer dismissed it out of hand, wouldn't even make the request. But I was judged by a jury of a segment of society that views me as inferior to them. And that's a fact. There were no Aboriginal people on my jury. Even though the fundamentals of justice and the sentiments put forth is to be judged by jury your peers. How can I be judged by jury my peers when that jury views me as inferior? That's not my peers. So yes, I do believe me being Aboriginal had an impact on my conviction. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Well, to further that, not only are you Aboriginal, you're a woman. Yeah. So that's going to be a hard hill for you to climb. Me much for your comment, though. I think we're out of time here now. One more question? Who's... Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the only thing I could say about that is the reality of my conviction was that when I went to prison, it warranted some sort of punishment, even though the punishment is going to prison. There is always a backlash of something when you go into prison. You know, you're going to continue to be punished. There always has to come a time for punishment to end and healing to begin. Because if the punishment never ends, the revolving door going back into prison will never go away. The punishment must stop at some point. Because if it doesn't, the damage is endless.
Well, just wait here for a second. I want to thank first Dean Axworthy for facilitating Bill's visit today, and Professor Parks for making room in our distinguished visitors speakers series. Coincidentally, next week the Honorable Irwin Cotler will be speaking at the law school, and it was Irwin Cotler as Minister of Justice who pulled the trigger and got things moving for Bill. So I encourage you to participate in that. Bill, I just want to, on behalf of the faculty, the staff, the students at Robson Hall and the University of Manitoba, thank you for coming and thank you for bearing your soul. I hope everybody here got a sense that as much as we talk about the law and learn about the law, there are people attached to it, and there are serious consequences to when we get it wrong. And it takes a lot of courage for people like Bill to come to places like this and talk about it, especially what he's been through. So on behalf of all of us, thank you very much.
My pleasure.